I spent a lot of time in Nicaragua. I'd like to show you an example of one of the reports. This is 3 years later during the Contra War, when President Reagan funded and equipped an army to attack Nicaragua from the north. And this is in a place called Huihuili, and this is the Battle of Huihuili. I'm with the Sandinista army being attacked by the Contras.
Oíme, ve, tráeme las piezas de mortero para acá, decirle.
He's gonna mortar them. This is the mortar, mortero.
Here.
Yeah?
It's upside down!
What do you do?
No sé.
¿Qué es ese? What's that?
Una falla.
You made a mistake.
Una falla, mecanemo.
There's a dead guy down there.
That's right,
One of them. Contra.
for sure,
Huh? Yeah?
for sure.
Yeah. How many Contra died today? ¿Cuánto Contra muriendo? About
About 12 or 13.
12 or 13?
Right.
Is this a victory for you?
We need pencils and notebooks to learn, to write, and to read. You know, we need food.
Yeah.
And all Reagan sent us is death.
There were a lot of unfortunate things going on in the world at that time, and we managed to find a lot of them. And it attracted the attention of a lot of the right-wing media groups. The one that was most active was a group called Accuracy in Media. And they couldn't decide who they hated more, me or Dan Rather. And so they would, like each issue of their magazine, they would trade off who they were taking shots at, me or Dan Rather. They went and they bought stock in RCA Corporation that owned NBC. They organized boycotts, trying to get the cereal makers and the Kleenex people to not advertise on NBC, specifically because of our reports. It's interesting, they showed up at the stockholders meeting once and they demanded of Thornton Bradshaw, who was the head of RCA, why he put our programs on the air. And he said, well, I don't necessarily agree with everything that Jon says, but every time one of his reports are on, I learned something. And Thornton Bradshaw was sort of a Renaissance corporate executive. He was one of the first corporate executives to demand that corporations be ecologically responsible. He taught at Harvard Business School when my dad went there. And it was one of the first times my dad acknowledged that I was doing something that he was proud of, because one of his heroes, Thornton Bradshaw, had something nice to say about me. But it got really hot at NBC, and so I was advised that maybe it would be a good idea to stay away from things outside the United States where I might bump into American foreign policy and incur the wrath of some of these organizations. Why don't I just look around the United States and try to stay out of trouble? So we broke the story of urban homelessness, the struggle of the family farmers, and then we decided we wanted to do something about industrial disease. It's a big problem in the United States. It's going to be less and less of a problem in the future because we're not going to have any factories anymore. But there's something called a hard metals disease. And hard metals disease occurs when you're grinding metal and the dust comes into your lungs, specifically cobalt dust that they use as a hardener to make very, very hard metal. It destroys your lungs. It's like giving you coal miner's disease, black lung disease. And we found a group of workers in upstate New York who were suffering from this and began to follow them. The name of the corporation was the Valinite Corporation. And we went to many of their factories, and at every single one of their factories, we found sick workers. And so this is from their factory out in California, where the workers are already suffering from hard metals disease.
At first, it was like an ordinary job until I started having breathing problems and coughing problems, and then it was just a chore just to get into work. And I coughed constantly, and I coughed until I vomited.
Kathy's back in the hospital, and she's really, really bad. This is Kathy's mom. This is Kelsey, and this is her father.
That was her graduation picture in 1976.
And when you look at your daughter now?
I mean, I feel sorry for her that she cannot lead a life like she would have loved. Valorant Corporation that has agreed to pay all the bills for Kathy's disease. Many a times they are not paying, and it continues on and on and on.
I am paying for the medical bills out of my life savings, mine and my wife's.
I hope they can face looking in the mirror, because one of these days they're going to pay, and I hope they pay dearly.
And we set about not only documenting what was happening to the workers, but proving why it happened. And we enlisted the cooperation of some scientists. And with the help of the scientists and with these air monitoring devices, we snuck into every valonite factory in the United States. And, you know, did we break the law? We broke the law. We trespassed. We went onto corporate property. And we tested the air in every single one of these factories. And here's an example. Not only were the factories in the United States dirty, the factories in Canada as well.
And this is the type of pump that can be used to make that sort of determination.
What do you think of your husband wearing this back to the factory?
Well, I know it kind of jeopardizes his job if he ever got caught, but if it helps to find out the truth, that's what we're interested in.
Can we get in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's everybody else? They left?
Yeah, this is a Friday night shift. Only two of us working right now.
What are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm grinding a job for GM.
Yeah. Hey, Barry, is there anything to suck that dust away from your lungs?
No, they don't have anything for that.
I mean, it just goes right there. There's no ventilation or anything?
That's our ventilation.
That hole up there?
That's it.
And that's supposed to ventilate all these machines?
Yeah. Now you can see all the carbide dust just laying on top of everything there.
So that stuff does float through the air, huh?
Yeah, how else would it got up here?
The air in that factory contained 23 times more cobalt than is permitted by American and Canadian law. It will destroy their lungs. They'll get the classic symptoms of hard metals disease.
After we received your results of the air sampling that was done in this building, we did a little investigating on our own. And we found as early as 1974, the Ontario Ministry of Labour was in this building doing air sampling. Their findings were excessive levels of cobalt dust. They were ordered to clean it up, but that's not half the battle. They came back in 1978, again in 1979, again in 1980. Each year came back and ordered the company to clean up the dust.
My husband has the hard metals disease, and I just can't sit back knowing what we know and knowing what we found out within the last month and a half and not try to stop. Even if we just stop one more person from getting the disease, I'll be happy.
What was the response of the company? I got death threats, which was interesting. I had been threatened other ways before, but I hadn't gotten death threats before. And one by one, they began closing their factories in the United States and Canada and shipping all the machines 200 feet south of the border to Mexicali, Mexico, where they could pay the Mexicans a quarter of their wages and poison them down there. So we went to Mexico. So here's the next part of the report.
Okay, we're flying along the border between the United States and Mexico. On the left-hand side is the United States, which is primarily agricultural. If you look off the right-hand side of the aircraft, you see one of the industrial parks of Mexicali, Mexico. That white building with the horizontal olive drab stripe, that's the Balanite building.
Do you get dirty? You get dust on your hands?
It doesn't come off?
When you blow your nose, you get the gray stuff come out of your nose?
What's that mean, Frank?
It means the dust is getting in their lungs.
And what's going to happen to them?
Some of them are going to get sick.
Mexicali, Mexico, and managed to get out and broadcast these reports. And as a result of these reports, the safety director of the Valeron Corporation went to jail. Unfortunately, they did something called an intermittent sentence. So he only had to go to jail on the weekends. And because he took the hit for the company, they bought him a Porsche. And so he would get in his Porsche in suburban Detroit and drive into the jail and spend the weekend in the jail, get in his Porsche and drive back. But it was one of the first times, and it was very specifically told to us by the federal prosecutor, that it was our reports that caused them to prosecute and enabled the conviction of this man for poisoning the workers. And at this time, General Electric bought NBC. And everybody was worried, how is this going to affect journalistic independence? General Electric is a company that has a lot of military work. It is a infamous polluter. It did just horrific things to the Hudson River, involved in nuclear energy. Who's going to dare make a report about some of General Electric's activities? And you know, everybody was always looking for somebody who's like stupid enough to get in the ring with the big bully. And I've always been pretty stupid, so it came to our attention that General Electric was in the same exact business as Valeron. They had 2 or 3 factories in the Detroit area serving the auto industry with these cobalt tools. So we got the OSHA reports. These are pretty old reports from the early 1950s. And it showed that not only was the factory dirtier, but it was around 10 times dirtier than the company we had just been chasing for the past 5 years. And so GE had been running death traps. Now, this wasn't something that these guys didn't know about. There are corporate memos from the late 1940s that document that all these companies and their association knew the effect of cobalt powder and knew it would cause hard metals disease. So everybody's going, great! John's going to fight NBC. John's going to fight GE, and this is going to be our test case for asserting our journalistic independence. And I thought, these are pretty old studies. Why don't we give GE a break? Let's assume that this was decades ago. If they've cleaned up their factories in an era where we are more conscious about safety at the workplace, let's let this slide. Why put my head in the guillotine? So we got the latest test results, and the factories were still dirty. They were very dirty. They were around 10 times over the permitted limit. We went out to the factories and we found the sick workers. Same symptoms, people who couldn't breathe, take you to the cemeteries with the graves of the dead workers, and the doctor that treated them wanted to come on the Today Show because his dad was an automobile worker who had died of industrial disease, and he wanted to tell the worker's story. So everything's scheduled to go on the Today Show. Everybody's got their ringside seats. The day before the broadcast, I got a phone call from the OSHA scientist who had given us the data. And he was almost crying on the phone. He said, John, I've made a terrible mistake. I've reversed the numerator and the denominator in one of the equations, and my numbers were all wrong. And my new numbers miraculously bring in GE this much under the limit, and their factories are legally clean. I said, you got to be kidding me. He says, no, this is true, this is true, this is true. I didn't believe him. I didn't know what to do. I said, well, I still have the doctor. I still have the sick workers. I called up the doctor, and I said, well, listen, will you come on the show? He says, who's this? And I said, this is Jon Alpert. He says, I don't know you. I said, doctor, I've been talking to you for the last 2 weeks. He says, I've never heard of you. I don't want you calling me. Never call me again. And hung up the phone. So somebody had gotten to OSHA. Somebody had gotten to the doctor. And at that particular point, it was suicidal for us to try and take on GE when we didn't have the evidence. And we had to put the story away. I knew that they had killed people in their factories, and I couldn't do anything about it.